Prisoner, starring Patrick McGoohan.
Friend of yours? You knew him?
No.
You're crying.
Funerals make me emotional.
Even those are people you don't know. I suppose you're wondering what you're doing here.
What's it all about?
Sit down and I'll tell you. I don't know who you are or who you work for. I will not make any deals with you. I've resigned. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered.
They might let me go. If you give me some sort of information.
Northern area, number 6, heading for outer zone in our vehicle. Orange alert.
Escape or capture? Watch this exciting adventure of the prisoner.
Where am I? In the village. What do you want? Information. Whose side are you on? That would be telling. We want information. 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 What do you want? Information. What do you want? What do you want? Information. What do you want? Whose side are you on? What do you want? Information. What do you want? Information.
Welcome, my friends. And let me explain to you right from the start, I am not a number. I am a free man. My name is John S. Drew. I am your host here for Once Upon a Village, a prisoner podcast. Now, that kind of makes me not only just your host, but I guess I would be number 2 as I'm guiding this podcast along, which means I need a number 6 to sort of bounce ideas off of and drive crazy with some of my inane suggestions about the way things are going with this show and such. And who better to do that than author, editor, Jim Beard. Hey, Jim.
Hey, I don't know if I can live up to that number. That's quite a big job. Wow. Okay. I'll try my best. This show. Whew. You know, if our pre-recording almost argument is any indication, we've got a lot to say about this show. And I got to tell you, this show has been with me almost as long as I've been on this earth. This is one of my earliest TV memories, watching episodes of this show, and it was very special to my father, who sat me down to watch this show, and it was very, very special to my late wife, who loved the show and was one of the biggest Patrick McGoohan fans that I've ever known.
Now, let me ask you this. You say earliest memories. You didn't see the original run, though, did you?
Well, I'm trying. You know what? I'm not really sure. It could very well have been the first. When was it broadcasted in the United States?
Let's see here. Now, it was broadcast. Oh, this is interesting. I don't have a listing of the United States air dates here. That when they aired on CBS.
It would have had to have been first syndication, because my father already knew about it. It's becoming clearer now in my head. Okay. My father already knew about the show and watched it. And it's so funny how indelible the images are from the show in my brain. That the reason that I know the song Dry Bones is because of this show. That was one of the things that I walked away from is remembering the character much later in the show singing Dry Bones, and maybe even what wasn't clear what the heck was going on. Not that anybody really knows what's going on.
True. Okay, here we go. I've got it here because IMDb gives us. Oh no, wait a minute. I thought they did. Never mind. I thought for a moment IMDb gave us the listing of because I know the American broadcast of The Prisoner was over the summer. It was whereas in England when it originally aired, it was in the fall. This might be it though. June 1st, 1968. This might be it.
Well, I'll tell you something. It was on, as far as I know, it was on the Canadian channel that my dad watched. I grew up in the Northwest Ohio area, about an hour south of Detroit. My dad watched an awful lot of Canadian television on what was Channel 9 at that point, and I'm pretty sure that this is where he watched The Prisoner. And we watched lots of different shows, Canadian shows and British shows on that channel. I'm pretty sure that was what it. But like I said, he already seemed to know what the show was, so I'm sure he watched the first, North American run of it, and then probably it was syndicated after that.
Right. It's interesting. I'm trying through the websites here and stuff, and cannot find a run order for America for CBS because it ran on the CBS network. I can find the original British air dates and their order when they ran on ITC. I can find the A&E order for the DVDs that they suggest. Because it's interesting to note, this is also a show that, compared to anything else, and you and I were talking about this and laughing at some of it before we started recording here, but this is the one show I know where everybody's got an opinion that it's like, no, it's this order for, this is the order for the episodes and such. Like, the original British run, The Chimes of Big Ben is the next episode. Whereas if you follow the A&E DVDs that were released, they have it as number 5. The Sci-Fi Channel ran a marathon of it in England. They put it at number 5. It's so weird to see how this is divvied out. And I got to say this too, just as a... Okay. Go ahead.
So since you're number 2... right. What order are we doing this show?
Well, I am going to go with the original British airing because that's first of all, that's the one I've got here. I can't, as I say, I can't find an American one so that we could do it the American way unless you just go with A&E. So to me, we'll go with the British way of going about it here, which I think for the most part you'll find should work.
Yeah. Well, I have the A&E DVDs of it, and that, let's see, is being endorsed by the Prisoner Appreciation Society.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so, do you want to go with that? Because then that would make the next episode free for all.
Not Chimes of Big Ben. Yeah, I guess.
Because I got to give the caveat here because this is another area that I could be stepping into it here. Okay, I do other podcasts on Shazam and the Secrets of ISIS. My host there is very knowledgeable about those topics, so he fills in all my gaps if I don't know something. I do podcasts on Batman 66, and I learned a lot over the time that I did it, but I had a fairly good knowledge of the series even going into it when I started the podcast, the Batcave Podcast, which Jim has been on numerous times. $6 Million Man. I put my knowledge of that show up against anybody else who says they are a Bionic fan. But I am not that knowledgeable, and there may be times I'm going to say things here on this podcast. I may do things that's going to make a Prisoner fan wince because I know how steadfast they are about this show, and they have to understand one thing. I'm approaching this show as someone who appreciates what it tried to do, what it did, the potential it had. I am one of these purists who don't care very much for the A&E remake they did a number of years ago. I didn't care for it. I watched the first night and I was bored out of my mind.
Oh, the Jim Caviezel?
Yes.
Yeah, we did watch it. I remember we debated about it, but we did actually watch it, and yeah, we walked away from it not being terrible. I mean, once you have the original, to try to remake it is a dicey proposition right there, but. It's funny because in some ways you could look at that as a continuation or a sequel or set in the same universe. In fact, it was supposed to be even more connected. The old man that Caviezel finds dressed in the same outfits from the 60s show was literally supposed to be number 6, the original number 6, and then that didn't happen.
Right. And again, I'll also, although add, I am a fan of, from the 90s, the Dean Motter comic book.
Oh, okay, good.
Which was, I thought, very well done, great art, and a nice, he got it. He wasn't trying to say, I'm going to play up the weird. See, and I think that's what I had a problem with. I'm going to play up the weirdness. And
Yeah.
you know, yes, it's weird, but what was your message? And I didn't feel after that first episode there was a message, you know.
Yeah.
And again, your message, and I guess this is also why I love this series, because as an English teacher, I always say to my kids, you get out of art what you see. You know, your interpretation of the art may be different than my interpretation, and as long as you can back it up with reasons why you feel it's this way, that this is a cry for love, or this is a horror story, or this is aliens from outer space. I'm like, as long as you can explain it, then the art is valid the way you see it, you know? And that's kind of the way The Prisoner is, because everybody gets something different out of this show when they watch it.
Yeah, I agree. It's all part and parcel of the show. Every single little debate that we've had, all the arguments that are out there, the opinions, the points of view, this is all this show, which is why it is unique among television shows.
Yes.
There's never anything like it before, and there's never been anything like it since. I think it's wonderful that it is as short as it is.
Yes.
I don't think there's any reason to bemoan the fact that it was, truncated and very abruptly, and we got the quote unquote ending that we got. I say no. I say it couldn't be any other way. It's one of these finite things, and I have found as I've gotten older more and more that I love these finite things. It's the same with the Batman 60s show, and we've talked about that before. People speculate a lot of what a fourth season could have been of that show. And I say, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but in the end, it's a finite thing. 3 seasons and it's done, and that's it. And you can sit and debate about, what it could have been. But you know what? That may have changed it as it went along. It's the same with this show. It is what it is. Its pedigree is so unique. The people involved in it, so unique. Everything about it, there's such a feeling to this show. And that's one of the things that I wanted to say. And when I rewatched Arrival the other day, it really struck me that the show is like half of a traditional show, the way it's put together and the way it's filmed and written, and the other half is very much of its time. There's this hipness about it in some of the very first opening scenes that are so psychedelic 60s, yet in many other ways it's sort of very traditional. So you get both of these playing at the same time, and it really just creates this incredible weird tone that leaves you off kilter, which it's supposed to,
It's got that nice balance. You're right about that. It's funny because my wife has watched the odd episode with me. She can't handle it's too much for her she says she has to think too much when she watches it. She doesn't like to have her entertainment that often be that thinking on a weekly basis. And I'm like, but it's a limited run. Come on. But anyway, she but like the one thing she caught, she said, yeah, this still though was trying to please the masters, meaning the networks, whether it be CBS or ITV.
Yes.
In that, okay, I'm giving you our edginess, I'm giving you our weirdness, I'm giving you our thought-provoking stuff, I'm questioning stuff and all that. But in the end, every week, I'm getting into a fight.
Yeah.
There is still fisticuffs. And it's funny because I think about that. The only show I can think of that comes close to that with that kind of edge and style to it, and frankly doesn't even still come close to The Prisoner, is Star Trek. Star Trek had to do that. I mean, if you remember the pilot episode, there was fighting going on there, and then there was Jim Kirk fighting basically a god in the second pilot. I mean,
You're right. It's exactly the same with this. This is a show about being stuck in a box and fighting authority and trying to retain your individuality and all of that. And that's exactly what's going on in the production of it.
Yes.
Very much so. And it's very much felt, in what we have on the screen. And if I may, just for a moment here, just bring up its star again. And I say it's star, but really its co-creator, Patrick McGoohan. And there was even, the struggle in that sense too between the guys that created this show. Even, long after, about the debates about who really created it. To me, there couldn't be any other person in this show, and that's why it was hard to take the Jim Caviezel one without Patrick McGoohan. He is such a unique individual,
right,
that comes through, and to me just really, really makes this show. He's just one of those actors that came along who stands out for so many reasons from others, of his same age and all of that. And I feel the same way about the another show that was very short and very dear to me too is Kolchak, the Night Stalker. Mm-hmm. Darren McGavin is Kolchak, and Kolchak is Darren McGavin. Darren McGavin's another one of these very unique individuals, and in many ways it's kind of a similar sort of thing that they say it's Darren McGavin who more or less pulled the plug on Kolchak. In many ways, McGoohan, who pulled the plug in a way. We all know what really happened, but I think McGoohan, I could see him really continuing on past a first season.
Right. Had you seen the original? Not the original, but I mean his other show, Secret Agent Man? It
was Danger Man.
Or Danger Man, yes.
Yeah, Danger Man in the original British run, and then then they took it and it became Secret Agent for the North American, markets. But yeah, believe me, you're in good company to think of it as Secret Agent Man, but that's just because of the Johnny Rivers song, Secret Agent Man. Yeah. Well, I grew up thinking it was always Secret Agent, and finding out much later on that it was actually called Danger Man. Mm-hmm. And I was looking over, talking about the pedigree of the prisoner, and I was looking over the information about that. And Danger Man sort of had two eras. It actually had this hiatus for a while. And when it came back, and this is, when it was being made and run in England, that it actually came back after being off the air for a little while and kind of reinvented itself. So there's actually sort of two versions of Danger Man. And even the character changed somewhat, and his job kind of changed somewhat, and the length of the each episode, I think it went from like a half hour to an hour, if I'm not mistaken. We're heading into possibly the biggest debate and argument of all concerning
yes.
this show, and it needs to be brought up.
I've heard it. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, is the prisoner John Drake?
Yeah.
The Danger Man character. And it's funny because you ask the creators of the show and you get different answers. McGoohan, went to his grave saying it wasn't. And his co-creator said at one point that it was. Here's the lovely, lovely thing about this show and its predecessor. It can be, or it doesn't have to be. It works both ways.
True.
And you can be perfectly content with whatever one you choose. I totally see that it could be John Drake, and I've kind of gone back and forth myself over the years. It doesn't go anywhere to really sit and get into it, There used to be so many rumors about that somewhere within this show somebody calls him Drake, and it's been shown that that's not true. It was, it's not in a script. It wasn't really said in the show. It may sound like it, but that's not really what it is. There might have been a thought that it could have been in the beginning, but that they didn't really want to pay the co-creator or the creator of the John Drake character to be able to say that, that the prisoner was John Drake. But you know what? I think in the end, it really works better if we just don't know.
Right.
And let you wonder, and then the people who want it to be him can have that, and the people who don't want it to be. I think I've gotten to the point where I'm pretty much it doesn't have to be. It's better that this is a man with no name, that the only one, who really knows his name is himself. And it's ironic that in the Johnny Rivers song, the lines of they're giving you a number and taking away your name.
Yeah.
Obviously. So that obviously plays into the whole thing. But again, it works both ways, and it's fun either way. But it's probably, better that it's not. Even though one of the novelizations that was done for The Prisoner actually starts off, I think, with the line like Drake awoke. How they got away with the official tie-in novel to do that when it was never confirmed in the show is, it's funny how back then they didn't really, lock down those sorts of things.
For me, I watched the show in the 80s as like an 18-year-old kid on our PBS station here in New York. It was at the same time I was also discovering Doctor Who. And McGoohan just stood out. Even if I didn't always understand what was going on with the story, his performance was so riveting that I was just drawn in. Yeah. And, it got me to, go see other things of his, which I don't often do with an actor where I'm that impressed with them. Timothy Dalton's one for one thing, but, and one of my favorites, I don't know if you've ever seen it, is Ice Station Zebra. Yeah,
well, and that movie plays into the history of this show that right. McGoohan's not in most of one episode because he's filming Ice Station Zebra. But yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that. But another classic sort of spy international thriller movie of the 60s. But You're right about McGoohan's intensity, and what I really love is I've always loved sarcastic characters, and Kolchak is one of those characters, and I just love McGoohan, his attitude and his little sarcastic asides to everything. And I made a note while I was watching Arrival, and it's right when he wakes up and he sees he's in the village, and he comes outside, and he starts walking through the streets. And I made a note to myself, and I said, is there anyone ever as cool as this man walking around the village, in his black suit and with his glowering looks, and I thought, wow, is this guy cool or what?
He did. It's funny because when I was watching him and he's there in like you said, the black suit and everything, and I'm thinking to myself, it's a shame that as a way to hold on to his individuality, he didn't keep that outfit. He gets put, but then I'm watching this episode because they say, "Oh, we burned your clothes," when they give him his new outfit and such. And I looked at it, and then all of a sudden I had a question, and I got to go back and scan through the first episode. Is he the only one besides number 2 who wears that similar style jacket with the white stripe?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Boy, what a question. Now you're making me question myself.
Because I thought that was standard issue for all of them. And then as I'm watching the episode, I'm like, oh, he's in a suit and he's wearing something different. And the women are all wearing they're wearing a multicolor umbrella on their
yeah.
And I'm going,
We'll be open in a minute.
What's the name of this place?
You're new here, aren't you?
Where?
Do you want breakfast?
Where is this?
The village.
Yes.
I'll see if coffee's ready.
Where's the police station?
There isn't one.
Can I use your phone?
Oh, we haven't got one.
Where can I make a call?
Well, there's a phone box round the corner.
Thank you.
And if that's the case, why did he get it? And why is he wearing the same outfit as number 2?
Yeah, I don't. Now I'm not sure. I wonder if that maybe came a little later, where that became more standard among what people wore. See, boy, now you're making me question myself.
That's the point of The Prisoner.
Well, I know, really, it is. Wow, I may have just imagined the whole thing.
Maybe I'm like I said, but as I was looking, because I kept looking for one other male in the entire episode. Once it clicked in my head, and like I said, I got to go back and I'm going to scan through it.
Yeah.
To me, I don't think anybody else is wearing a black jacket with white trim like he and number 2 do, which then leads you to wonder, were they grooming him to eventually be, was that the whole point?
I love that. Well, this is what we're going to do as we go along through these episodes. We're going to watch for that. We're going to watch for what people are wearing in this. But you're right about the multicolored capes that they're wearing in the show.
Now, primarily, just to, and this is the thing, out of all the episodes, I think this one is, if you're trying to do a synopsis, in some ways it should be the easiest, and in other ways it's the most difficult, because it's basically setting up the whole scenario. It's the world building here, because, he arrives on the island, he wakes, he meets number 2, he sees what life is like in the village, he makes, attempts to escape, which are foiled. And it's funny because I said this to you at the beginning before we started this whole thing. I thoroughly enjoyed the first half or so, where we were dealing with Guy Dolman's number 2. But then suddenly George Baker shows up as the new number 2 for the second part of this. And I don't know, it's just like everything went to a screeching halt, because I felt like there wasn't a resolution with part 1. And not that you get resolution at the end of each episode. It's a sort of a reset. He's back in,
You're right. There is kind of 2 stories in this. And I think it's kind of maybe the dividing line is the hospital.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I made a note to myself that once we reach the hospital, to me, there's sort of a tone shift. Mm-hmm. And I don't dislike it, and again, it keeps you off kilter, off balance through this. There's a strange insertion of it becomes like more science fiction at that point.
Right.
Or even, and I made a note of this to myself, is almost farce. It's when he's going through the hospital and he looks through the one window, the door,
which is very disturbing.
And there's the people sitting there, all lined up, and then the guy that's saying all the gibberish.
Yes, that's the part. Yeah.
In some ways, it's kind of a preview of things to come in this show, like much later, like at the end in the 2-part finale, where all bets are off and it's just total what the heck is going on kind of a thing. And you kind of get a taste of it in the hospital. In the first half of this episode, there really isn't anything like that. It could almost be believable.
Yes.
It's surreal. And then he meets number 2, and then as they say, shoot becomes real. Number 2 just right off the bat spells it out.
I suppose you're wondering what you're doing here.
It hadn't crossed my mind. What's it all about?
Sit down and I'll tell you. It's a question of your resignation.
Go on.
The information in your head is priceless. I don't think you realize what a valuable property you've become. A man like you is worth a great deal on the open market.
Who brought me here?
I know how you feel, believe me. And they have taken quite a liberty.
Who are they?
A lot of people are curious about what lies behind your resignation. You had a brilliant career. Your record is impeccable. They want to know why you suddenly left.
What people?
Personally, I believe your story. I do think it was a matter of principle. But what I think doesn't really count, does it? One has to be sure about these things.
And that gives you the right to poke your nose into my private business?
Now, please. It's my job to check your motive.
I've been checked.
Of course, but when a man knows as much as you do, a double check does no harm. A few details may have been missed.
I don't know who you are or who you work for. And I don't care. I'm leaving.
And then we get this sort of a little bit of this tone shift, and then we sort of get the next story come in with the guy that he recognizes in the hospital, Cobb. I had to look at my notes.
Yes, Cobb.
Cobb, who there's this weird sort of thing in there, and I didn't totally get this, and it's funny that I noticed this the second time around, or not the second time around. I don't know how many times I've watched Arrival. I haven't watched it in a while. Is that Cobb is called at one point an amnesia case, but when the prisoner first sees him, Cobb does know who he is.
Yep.
No, he knows who the prisoner is, and he knows who he himself is.
Yep.
So I'm not sure why later on they refer to him as Cobb the amnesia case. I don't know if you picked up on that.
I did, but I and at first my first thought was maybe they were saying he was an amnesia case so that it was like, okay, you don't really know who he is, number 6, but he did. I mean, he says his name.
Yeah.
So
what I also really love is that you never truly know when 6 is being sincere and what he's presenting to us, the audience, and the characters around him.
Mm-hmm.
He seems sincere when he sees Cobb.
Cobb. What are you doing here? And you? I don't know. Can't remember much. How long have you been here? 3, 4 weeks. Months. It's difficult to work out. What happened to you? What are they doing? Keep asking me questions. They want to know all about me. You told them? No. I don't know. I'm so tired, I must sleep. Oh, this is important. Who brought you here? How'd you get here? Who brought you? I was in Germany. I'm going back to my hotel. I went into the bedroom. I think I went to bed. I was here.
He seems sincere. He's definitely not sincere with the maid.
no.
I forgot to
How do you stop this thing?
We can't.
Why not?
It's automatic.
Who controls it?
I have no
Who
idea.
runs this place?
I don't know. I really don't know.
You never wondered. You never tried to find out. How long have you been here?
As long as I can remember.
And your parents?
They died when I was a child.
You don't remember them?
I found out it's wiser not to ask questions. We have a saying here. A still tongue makes a happy life.
People must have tried to get away from here. How many have succeeded?
Don't ask.
Has anyone ever escaped?
Some have tried. They've been brought back. Not always alive.
Oh. What are you afraid of?
Nothing. I've said too much. What time tomorrow? I know what you must think of me. Put yourself into my position. They offered me my freedom in exchange.
Strange for what?
To get into your confidence. Make you trust me. And tell them everything about you.
Then they'd let you go. You believe that? With that knowledge in your head, you really believe that they'd let you go?
I hadn't thought about that.
Obviously not.
They might. They might let me go. If you give me some sort of information. Oh, please help me. Please help me.
Your services will not be required tomorrow.
But whether or not what we're seeing in how he's reacting with the next woman to come along is really kind of unclear or up in the air. And again, I really like that. As much as the village authorities are playing games with him, he's playing games. And then that really comes into effect as we start to go along. There's an episode coming up in particular where he just totally becomes the game player and tries to beat them at their own game.
See, but that's what also works in that way, because we don't know, like you say, what he presents to us. Because under normal circumstances, even a TV show where you've got a lone character, he's usually got somebody. Quantum Leap, Sam has Al to bounce ideas off of. All these shows have somebody else there. Whether you listen to that person all the time or not is one thing, but they're there. He has no one to talk to or who to trust or who to, and this is early on in the game. So, it's possible with Cobb, he's a bit more sincere as he's still trying to figure things out. But as the show goes on, he's not only playing games with the village and the folks of the village, he's playing games with us, the viewer, because we don't know. Yeah, exactly right. And that's what I'm getting at. His constant betrayals, all the people who betray him, sometimes he knows and sometimes he doesn't, makes him sympathetic. The Cobb's betrayal right there, because again, we assume that he's sincere when he sees them. I believe at one point he even says that Cobb was a good man. I think he says that to the woman, Cobb's lover, we assume. Right. That he says that he was a good man. So I take that one at face value. There's one other thing I want to bring up here, talking about number 2 and the village authorities and the unseen number 1. It is interesting to me that they act like and seem to know everything about him, except for the thing, the whole crux of the show is why he resigned. They seem to know everything except why he resigned. But I put this down in my notes. They had to have known he'd be trouble. They do act a little surprised when he doesn't immediately fall in line. It's hard to imagine that they thought that maybe they could just put him in the village and that would be enough, and they'd get what they wanted. When they know, they have his, they know exactly who he is and how he is, and they have the file on him, and they've been watching him and filming him and everything all along. That they had no, did they not think that they would get any sort of trouble out of this guy? Well, I don't know about that, because I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying about the surprise and stuff, but there is that part there where, like, number 2 is pointing out to the prisoner. He says, there was that older couple who...
Beautiful day.
They didn't settle for ages. Now they wouldn't leave for the world.
You mean you brought them around to your way of thinking?
They had a choice.
And I'm not trying to point out anything that falls apart in the show or the construction of anything like that. It's endlessly fascinating, I think. How many questions? Now, I know people who could watch this show and it would drive them up the wall because they wouldn't get answers. And I would have to say to them, you're going to sit and watch whatever it is, 16, 17 episodes. You're not going to get any answers. Sorry. All you're going to get is more questions. Like this one, talking about walking around. So he starts walking around, and I mean before number 2 takes him around, he starts to meet people. And who he is meeting are workers, not like just guests, but the people who work in the village. He meets the lady working at the restaurant. He meets the guy running the shop when he asks for the map, his maid and all of that. Here's what I wonder. Are these people all former spies, or, even the workers? Right. And I know it's not necessarily that everybody is spies, but or in the somehow even in the support business, like who are the people who are the workers? Like, let's take the guy in the shop. Who is he? Did he have a former life? Was he brought to the village much in the same way as as Cobb and the prisoner? Or is he like one of the guys that works on the turnpike, works the gift shop on the turnpike and goes home at the end of the day? Well, see, that's the thing I was wondering, because one of the notes I have here, is that first and foremost, it's 4 minutes before we even get any dialogue.
It's the whole. It's an extended opening sequence. Then him roaming around, checking things out, and then finally he comes upon the woman outside the cafe and such, and she says, "We'll be opening soon." And I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching it, though, is everybody in the village in on this?
Yeah. See, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Because there's that whole thing with the maid later on where, number two's like, I really thought she was going to get him.
Yeah.
Which then leads to your whole thing about how, they're kind of surprised that he's not susceptible or, I guess, breaking down so quickly. I don't know. Yeah.
Now, the maid, to me, is pretty transparent, and number 6 realizes that. Mm-hmm. The next woman, it isn't. I could almost see how he would be fooled by her.
Right.
He's wary, but he starts to, believe her, and obviously does, because he, gets in the helicopter and thinks he's getting away and all of that. And that is crushing. You really do feel that, when you can tell when he starts to think he's getting away, he's really doing this. And then they take control of the helicopter and bring him right back. And this happens over and over again. Wait till we get to the chimes of Big Ben, which is just horrible. Yeah. In its crushing defeat. Yeah, I really, really want to know, is there anybody who gets to go home? Is number 2, is he as much of a prisoner as the prisoner?
Yeah.
It's also, I at one point, you said it, he said you might meet people you know. It's kind of amazing that somebody like number 2 could be given such an important position in this whole thing, whatever it is, and that our hero doesn't recognize him. You would think that the prisoner, number 6, is so well versed in the spy community that he might know, and he doesn't ever recognize any of the number 2s. No, the long line of number 2s that come along. It's endlessly fascinating. It's layer after layer after layer in this show.
Yeah, and layer after layer, and then also just. As I say, this episode is pretty much the world building episode. It's a world. It's not anything that is simplistic.
Yeah.
Whether it's the communication system, the methods of transportation around the village, the fact that there's even, and I think this is so interesting. If this is supposed to be a place where they're trying to get information, what's with the monetary units? I thought that was so fascinating. Why bother with a money system?
Yeah, really, really good point. In such short order, you get the world building, and that's another thing that as a writer myself that I really love is the world building comes so quickly in this, and you boom, 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 you get it all, one little thing after another. You get a real sense of how this place is set up. That nobody owns a car. It's taxi service, and it's local service only.
Yes.
And the credits, like, you say over and over and over again. One of the things that really helps, and it's another just absolutely genius part of this show, is the locale. A lot has been said about that this is an actual village in Wales.
Yes.
There's a huge, long, unpronounceable Welsh name for it, but the shorthand is just to call it Portmeirion. The incredible blessing that they got to be able to use this place and really use it. They overrun the place, I'm sure. To film in there. And it's just incredible. From what I understand, it was actually in an earlier Danger Man episode, and that's most likely where McGoohan first encountered it, and that, may have stuck in his head, or George Markstein, or is it Steen? Not sure. Mark Stein?
I think so. I think it's Mark Stein.
Mark Stein. whose head it's stuck in to use this place. But that really helps that it is its own thing. What's funny about it is it's referred to as a resort or a hotel. The show gives you the idea that it is truly a village, meaning a little town, where I guess in reality it's all one thing. It's all one resort,
right,
or hotel.
And my understanding is it's still intact to this day. I mean, as is.
It is. It was a dream of, my wife and I to someday go there. And they hold prisoner festivals there. I'm not sure if they still do, but, that would have been just amazing. That it's not a set that was torn down years ago. It's not like the Batcave that was torn down the moment the show was canceled. The Batman show was canceled, and you can never, ever, ever go there, ever.
Yeah.
But you can actually go to the village, and from what I understand, it pretty much looks like what you see in this show. And wouldn't that be insane to go there? And to wear one of those jackets and your deck shoes, and walk around in there. Another thing that is kind of funny and helps with this world building consistency, and it's a small thing, but I love it, is the font, the type style, the font that they picked out to use for all the signage and the maps and everything. When we were, my wife and I were prepping our wedding many, many, many years ago, we looked into it and found out what that font is called. And we actually had our wedding invitations done in that font. It's called Albertus. And it's a very unique font. If anybody knows this show, the moment you see it, you know that it's this font that they used for everything.
I thought it was also funny because I never noticed this before, but there is sort of, I don't know if it's supposed to be opposites or if it's supposed to be a nod to letting you do some sort of rebellion. Because there was that one sign there that said, walk on the grass.
Yeah, I love that. That's a test. It has to be. It's a psychological test. Because you'd if I saw that, you'd walk up and you'd go, what do they mean here?
Right, because we're conditioned.
Right, like, is it really like you said, the opposite? I'm not supposed to walk on the grass. Yeah, it's a funny little sign there, but when you think about it, it becomes more and more devious.
Yes. Yep.
Now, flat out devious, and we haven't even brought it up yet, is Rover.
Well, yeah.
Rover is another one of my earliest memories of this show, and how you could be a small child and watch this show and not walk away absolutely terrified by Rover. I don't know. I don't know any kid that probably wasn't, really marked forever by Rover. And it's so simple. It's just a balloon.
It's a balloon, and it's that roar. Which
it's the
really
roar.
Even that, I don't know, but the roar isn't even that scary, but just the way it's all shot, in particular that scene again with number 2, and something else I found interesting, because again, you have to wonder how much the village is in on this. Number 2 at one point says, everyone stop, and the whole village freezes. And then there's that one person who just, for whatever reason, loses it, and Rover collects him. And when you see it coming towards him and stuff, and at first you're like, oh, that's ridiculous. But then it engulfs him, and you see the face and and you're like, all right, that's freaky.
Yeah, the whole thing, it's the simplicity of the design, plus the roar, plus the smothering that creates that horrible, horrible psychological creature weapon thing. Yeah, that scene is really something where they're out and about, and then suddenly number 2 is up on that balcony with the megaphone, and everybody stop. And why that one guy freaks out? And did number 2 know this in advance? Did he consider killing 2 birds with one stone? we're going to take this one guy out anyway, so let's do it while I'm walking our new guest around. Right. And because that'll be really great. It'll be a really great example to him that you do not mess with this thing, Rover. And, again, all it is a balloon being blown with air guns, but it's just terrifying the way it bounces. And I love it, when everybody's standing still and this thing just moves past them, and then later on when it chases number 6 down and it gets him too, when he's trying to get to the helicopter. And there's this sort of funny standoff between him and Rover. He has the watch thing that's supposed to let him through. But I love it because he's not sure if it's working. And he has to kind of stand there and wait and see if Rover will do something. Yeah. And then when he gets back, there's Rover. And I love it because there's a very clear sense of Rover escorting him away again to his cage. And then we get the classic, with the thing at the end with the bars slamming shut across the scene. The iconography in this show is just amazing.
Yeah. That's one thing. Do you think Rover is sentient?
Yes. Although it's controlled. And he's being released. Right. He's being released from under the water
Release
somehow.
The hounds,
Yeah, it's almost like he was designed. He's a biological. I'm saying he. It is a biological weapon that was created. But yes, I think it actually does have some sentience that. They control it, but it also can operate, on its own too. It knows what to do when it's released. It's like release the Kraken.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it's like.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a couple of little things that just stuck out to me. There's a reference at one point because as he's walking through the village, number 2 with the prisoner, they see a group of people over by that boat and they're just dancing maniacally there and such.
Probably see the funny side of that. I'm told some people even get seasick on it.
What are they here for? St. Vitus dance?
I'm glad you've still got your sense of humor.
And I've never heard that expression before, so I looked it up. It's a condition that people have where they've got basically rapid, uncoordinated jerking movements that affect the face, hands, and feet. So that's why when he says, you still have your sense of humor or something, it's like, okay.
I knew the phrase St. Vitus dance, but it's been a long, long time. And I'm so glad that you looked that up and brought that up because, again, that's just really great. That's really funny. And that's another thing is I'm such an Anglophile. I just love, British stuff so much. And especially when you get things that we don't immediately get. I've been doing a very slow rewatch of Monty Python. I even, it's funny. I laugh even at the British references that I don't understand because I get the point that there's supposed to be something funny about it. But speaking of which, and I made a note of this, English bacon is gross.
Yeah, it is. No, it is. The English Irish bacon, not a fan of it at all. No.
Oh my goodness, is that the gross? My dear wife always used to bring that up. She had the great pleasure of actually going to all 4 countries of the UK a few years before I met her. And she came back with the opinion that English, she would always say, what the British call bacon is not anything like what we would call bacon. She said it's basically an uncooked piece of fat.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that breakfast didn't look bad at all. I do like that scene.
I hope you don't mind a working breakfast. Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Indian or China?
Either. With lemon.
1 or 2 eggs with your bacon.
2? That will be all. Help yourself to toast.
When number 2 mentions toast, help yourself to toast, there's this really wonderful thing that McGoohan does with the dish that has the toast in it, that he approaches it slowly and then reaches out and then lifts the cover off and it's toast underneath. But it's almost as if he thinks there's a snake underneath that's going to bite him. Or it's almost as if he's saying in his head, oh, it couldn't be toast. You know, like they knew exactly how he would like his breakfast.
Oh, sure. Well, remember, he says 1 egg or 2, and he says 2, and he lifts the cover, and there's 2 eggs.
And there's 2, yeah. The lemon in his tea and all that stuff. I know, and I love that. Like, it's almost like we can hear him thinking, like, could there really be toast under there? And sure enough, there's toast under there.
But then it brings all this back to what the whole point of this show is. If they know him that well, that he wants 2 eggs for breakfast and how he likes his toast, how is it? And I'm not questioning the logic here. Their thing is, how is it we don't know why he left? Why don't we know this piece of the puzzle of his life? Because we know everything about this man. We know he likes lemon. We had the lemon ready for his tea, you know. And the whole thing with offering the types of tea, that was a courtesy thing because he goes, it doesn't matter, you know. Yeah, they knew it.
I personally think, since you brought it up, I personally believe that the answer to this entire show is very simple and is not complicated. And in some ways, the prisoner is laughing inside because there really isn't any complicated reason as to why he resigned. He had just had enough. And the authorities can't take it like that. They may have said it couldn't be that simple. It had to be something more. Something complicated, something devious, something traitorous, whatever it is. And the reality may simply be that number 6 had just had enough. But the whole point of this is that it is nobody's business but his own. And he is going to hold on to that even if it means his death. Because that's his. You know, he owns that reason. And I really love that. You know, that's I'm going to put up a resistance for the simplest of things. Just because you asked me, I said I'm not going to tell you, and you don't like that answer.
I agree with you, but I think the whole thing of why did you resign is not the question of the show, though. I think the question of the show is, who are you?
Oh, pardon me. I mean on a very basic level.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
That's what they're always. No, not. Yeah, no. You're right. No, you are absolutely right. I see, because there's the question of the show in its whole construction and concept,
right?
And then there's the like the literal question that goes through the episodes. You know, we want information. You won't get it.
Right.
They
think they know him.
Yeah.
They think they know him, and this is driving them crazy. And that's part of what, like you say, then the game with him, because he's driving them crazy by not, you know, coming right out. And they bring up things like, loyalty and stuff like that. And he's like, I was loyal. I am, I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm still... Because who are you loyal to first? Are you loyal to yourself? Are you loyal to your country? Are you loyal to your God? Are you loyal to, whatever?
Yeah.
That's
a really good question right there, because we don't know who runs the village.
Right.
But there is a question of his loyalties. If it's not being run by his bosses, which we assume to be the British government.
Yes.
Then what do they really care about the loyalty question so much? But then again, we don't know, or it goes back to this: is he John Drake? John Drake, I believe, in the latter part of the Danger Man show, worked for the British government rather than any sort of like international, concern. It's another good question. How would that matter? As that Dean Motter comic put forth, I believe, and it's been a long while since I read it, that it was being run by a combination of nations.
Right.
It was a place to put everybody. There's a great line in Arrival that my wife and I repeated over and over again for the 30 years that we were together. And I don't know why it struck her, but she just loved the line. And that's when he gets into the taxi in the beginning and the woman speaks to him in French or whatever, and he starts questioning it, and she said, I thought you might be Czech or Pole, and he says, what would Czechs or Poles be doing here? My wife repeated that over and over and over again for all the years that I knew her. She just loved that line. What would Czechs or Poles be doing here? Poles or Czechs, that's the way it said.
Yeah.
And I love that because, A, it speaks to the idea that anybody can be put into the village, but it also speaks to number 6's sort of, I don't know, xenophobia or his, the sort of looking down his nose at anything that wasn't British. Like, what was he assuming at that point? Well, what kind of a question is that? What would Poles or Czechs be doing here? Like, he must have assumed right off the bat that it was just all British.
Right.
There. He sees some people and they have British accents, if that's what we're to believe, that what we're hearing is what he hears. And then he says, what would Poles or Czechs be doing here? If I was that woman, I would have said, well, why wouldn't they be here? Like, what is that supposed to mean?
Oh.
Quite fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I forget, because isn't there there's one episode there but it's all a simulation where they're in like a Western town in America, right?
Yeah, that's Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling.
Which my understanding is one of the lesser appreciated episodes of the series.
That's true. My wife didn't care much for that one. And she didn't care much for the one that McGoohan is not in, except for like at the very beginning and the very end. And I think that's Schizoid Man, if I'm not mistaken. And it's mostly because he's just not in it. But yeah, she wasn't. Or wait a minute. It is Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling.
And that's the one that actually got banned here in America.
Oh.
Because it was a thinly veiled, apparently, statement on the Vietnam War.
Oh, okay, sure. Now I have to look. Oh boy, am I wrong? And people listening, you can turn it off now because Jim doesn't know what he's talking about. It's been a little while. Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling is not the one. It's Living. I almost said it's Living in Harmony.
Okay.
Is the Old West one because the town is called Harmony.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually quite fond of the one called The Girl Who Was Death. Because it has nothing to do with the village. It's actually like a Danger Man episode.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. We got a lot of great things coming to us as we go over this show.
Well, see, that's the thing, because it's funny, because you started this by saying the 17 episodes, it's a tight thing. It's encapsulated. Like you wouldn't want more. My understanding was this wasn't even supposed to be 17 episodes long, but they wanted a few more episodes for whatever reason. So that's when, The Girl Who Was Death and such, which was more of a Danger Man. Like they started bringing in other things to sort of pad it out a little more. And I don't know if maybe in some cases, some of those things like Living in Harmony might have been a padded episode.
I hesitate to say anything because I just got in trouble for repeating a legend on something else. I was on a podcast and I repeated the false legend about why Julie Newmar is not in the 3rd season of Batman.
Okay.
Or pardon me, no, see, I'm wrong about what I was wrong about. No, pardon me. Why she isn't in the feature film?
Oh, okay.
And I said the thing about McKenna's Gold.
Right.
And I actually had somebody call me on that because I wasn't thinking clearly, and I repeated, a much repeated falsehood. So I was about to say my understanding is that the Prisoner production team was cut short, and they scrambled to make the 2-part ending just to put some sort of capper on it, and that wasn't even anything that they ever intended. McGoohan goes off and supposedly writes this thing, and it comes back, and it's just nuts, almost makes no sense whatsoever, and very, to a lot of people, especially the last few scenes of the last episode, very unsatisfying. But so now I'm not gonna say that, because I don't know. We're gonna have to look into that. I think by now our listeners have got to realize, and you said it in the beginning, we are not the experts of minutia on this show, and that's not what this podcast is about. This is really about 2 guys just doing a rewatch of this show and enjoying it for what it is, and talking about things that appeal to us, that are fun or don't make sense, and things like that. There's going to be lots and lots of people who may listen to this podcast and say, oh my God, they don't know anything about the I have the call sheets right here.
Oh, I always love those. I love those folks who come forward with
I do love those folks, actually, because they make the world go round. It's made up of different people. But, what I would say is set down your call sheets and your blueprints of the sets and things like that, and just kind of sit back with us and enjoy talking about these things. We're just going to bring up stuff that, off the top of our heads, or things that we made notes about. And you know what? We're going to find out maybe later what is and what is not. And you guys out there are going to help us with that, just like you've done with the Batcave podcast and whatever else. Let us know. We're not the idiots that we may sound like, or at least I may sound like. But you know what?
Or the drunks.
Right. Yeah. I promise not to drink on this one like I did on the Green Hornet podcast. But you know what? Just come along and enjoy this little trip to the village, and not worry about all the minutia, and that will all come out in the wash as we go along.
Exactly. I just want to, I'm pretty much done with my notes here, but I wanted to just take a quick moment here, because it is a British show, and I can't help but, as I'm watching it, especially in the 60s, go, oh, I know him, and I know him. And I remember, first and foremost, as we said, this episode's called Arrival, written by George Markstein, who was a British journalist turned writer. And he was the story editor for the first 13 episodes, and David Tomblin, who was the producer of the series. Some actors who appeared in this that just stuck out to me, that British fans will probably be like, duh, of course. Angela Muscat, which we also didn't really get to here, the butler throughout the series here, number 2's tattoo, his silent tattoo, I guess you could almost say. This is Fantasy Island.
Well, you called it the island a little earlier on, and I wasn't going to say anything. You say when he comes to the island.
Right.
Yeah, well, we don't know it's an island.
We don't.
No, but I don't think it is. But anyway, it was funny because before we started recording, you said something about I want to talk about the cast. And they go, not necessarily the regular cast, but and I laughed, and it's like, the regular cast? You're talking about 2 people.
Right. Well, I only bring up Muscat for this one because it's sort of fitting that we're starting this on the night that we're recording this. I'm also in the middle of watching old William Hartnell Doctor Who's, and I am on part 4 of Galaxy 4, which is the season 3 premiere of Doctor Who back in 1966, I think it was. And Muscat plays he's in a costume playing a robot called a Chumbly.
Oh, That's great. So he's not. You don't actually see him. Is that right?
You don't
Unlike
see
in The
him. No,
Prisoner.
he's
Okay.
he's in the costume as the robot. They've got these. They look like weird looking Michelin men. They're just very short.
It makes me wonder if he was an actor. You know what I mean? Like, did he, could he act? Obviously he was being hired for his size, but really, because he doesn't really get an opportunity in The Prisoner to act. I hate to put it like this, but it is more or less this. He was more or less a set piece. I love that he gets the final shot in Arrival.
Yes.
With his umbrella. I love that. I just think that's great.
Yeah, it's true. I know I looked, because that's what it was I wouldn't have known. I just happened to look at his IMDb, and he has a few other listings of things he did, but I didn't take a time to notice that. I just happened to scan down and I saw Doctor Who, and I'm like, ooh, and how ironic. I'm listening to this because the actual video for this Doctor Who story is missing. So I'm actually listening to the audio. So it's not even like you can hear him. All you hear is the beep beeps of the chumbly, the sound effects added in.
Now, what do you think about the people who speculate that his character in The Prisoner is number one?
That I've never heard before, but I can see it.
Isn't that wonderful? Wouldn't that be just the funniest thing all along? He's number one, but he's acting like the butler to number two.
Yeah, I can see it.
That's just great. I just love that.
And it would be another good fake. In the sense,
definitely.
The way the series has its series of fakes. Just really quick, two other actors who appear in this episode. Guy Dolman, our first number two that we see in the first half of the episode. Later on, and I'm looking, I'm listening to his voice, and finally it hit me. He appears as a submarine commander on the 4th season $6 Million Man episode U-509.
Is that right? No, This is number one, number two, not
Correct.
number two, number two.
Number one, number two, yes.
Number one, number two. Okay, gotcha.
Yep. So if you're ever checking out $6 Million Man, it's 4th season, towards the end there, just before he shaves the mustache, Lee Majors, and the episode's called U-509. And the other character is the guy who does the analysis of number 6 there. He
seemed familiar to me, other than in this. I don't
know how familiar you are with old Doctor Who, but he was in one of the more. Okay, well there you go. So
I know the actors who actually played Doctor Who.
Well, no.
Yeah, if hard pressed, I could probably even name them in order. But other than that, I don't really know. Those actors.
He played, and you'll get it actually because it connects then with our Batman 1943 reviews we're doing on Batcave. He played a character called Jago in The Talons of Weng Chiang, which was basically BBC letting Tom Baker be Sherlock Holmes as he and his companion go through London trying to find a murderer that turns out to be a time traveler from the 50th century who's using various Asian people in London for his servants. And one of them is an Englishman who they tape up the eyes, and he does the voice and everything. You will fall into the talons of Weng. And it's so offensive, and at the same time, it is one of the most brilliant stories out of his run as Doctor Who, and it's let down by, and you had a white guy be Asian.
I actually read we're getting way off the truth, but I actually read the novelization of that.
Oh, okay.
It's funny. I've read more Doctor Who books than I've actually seen Doctor Who episodes. But, real quick about number 2, I have always maintained that one of the real beauties, glories of this show is its number 2s.
Yes.
To me, you look forward every episode to see what number 2 is like. And there's so many different kinds of number 2s. We even get female number 2s.
Yes.
That's fun because you can sit and compare and contrast them, and everybody has like their favorites number 2s. And I have a couple of favorites coming up in episodes.
I didn't realize I mean, I knew about Leo McKern. I mean, obviously he stands out as one of the number twos. But,
yes.
But Peter Wingard's in this as a number two.
There you go.
You know?
Yep.
The man who I don't get as a sex symbol was a sex symbol in the 60s.
Well, it was the 60s.
Right.
Oh, I do that all the time. God love them. I look at the Beatles and especially when they first got big, and I go, what did the girls really see in these guys? And it's not just because I'm a guy, but you know what I mean? It's like maybe Paul sort of, but it's like, what, like, why did anybody go crazy over Ringo? God love him, but he's Ringo, but like, what? I never got that thing, but oh well. Being completely straight, I have a man crush on Patrick McGoohan.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
fair.
I just, again, is not only a unique actor, but a unique looking actor too. Again, you cannot mistake him for anybody else.
He got me watching Columbo.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
My wife liked a very short-lived show of his called Rafferty.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, look that up. She followed him, all along, and she could cite so many different things that he was in. But he had his own show, 70s, and I believe it's called Rafferty.
I want you to help me prove Tom's death was an accident.
What do you think was wrong with him?
I think he was wired.
And he told me that you're conducting your own investigation into Mr. Hampton's death.
Well, I'm conducting an investigation into his life. I want to find out why his airplane fell out of the sky.
It's my mother.
What about it?
Tranquilizers. She took almost a whole bottle.
It didn't last very long at all.
Right. So let me ask you this. All right. I've gone through all my notes here. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on in terms of this episode?
Let me see. Albertus font. English bacon is gross. Rover terrified me as a child. Oh, really quick. We talked about the two ladies in this show and the characters. Another very, very important point here is that number 6, the prisoner, whoever he is, cannot be seduced. This is another sort of carryover from Danger Man. One of the things about John Drake, unlike James Bond, the two things really is that John Drake very rarely used a gun. And he never really romanced women. And a lot of that, they say, is McGoohan's insistence that it be a show that was good for the whole family.
Right.
So he didn't like that. I think it's two things that really make the character of John Drake stand out. And those carry over to the character of the prisoner. And it's the same sort of thing. There's actually a moment where the prisoner says, and I keep trying to remember if he says it to number 2. No, he says it to the maid, I believe. He says that's another mistake they made. Meaning, don't send a woman in and try to get me that way, because it ain't going to work. And again, it's a very unique thing. And it goes, to me, it harkens back to Doc Savage, my most favorite pulp character from the pulp magazine era, Doc Savage. Doc Savage is another character who sort of, bucked the trend, and he doesn't get involved with women. That's not a weakness of his. He has a very clear-cut reason why he doesn't have romances with women, because he it wouldn't fit into his line of work, and they'd be in danger and all of that. And it's just another very interesting thing, because the prisoner says that line so strongly. That's another mistake they made about trying to send in women to bat their eyes at him, and that doesn't work on him.
Somewhere along the line, I seem to remember reading something about. Maybe I'm just imagining it, but you just clicked with me that the prisoner just was almost anti-woman, which is obviously not the case as far as the show. I mean, because you got the number 2s and all, but that, he didn't hold them up as very in high regard.
Were you talking about McGoohan now?
No,
or
I'm talking about the prisoner himself.
Yeah. It's probably like we could probably get a whole podcast out of that. And you know what? I'd actually like to hear from people on this note. We don't have to go into it big now, but I think there's an argument that could be made that he's a misogynist and that there's a misogynist vibe that goes through this whole thing.
Well, it'd be interesting to see, because we've got those 2 episodes at one point where we've got because there's two episodes with female number 2s.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And how he responds to them and their prompting compared to a man's prompting for information.
Absolutely. You know what? Those female number 2s are presented as the equal of the male number 2s. They don't act any different because they're women, at all. So it's a really good thing. And we can talk about that as we go along, about his attitude towards women. There is one episode, and I can't think of what it is, and I'll be looking forward to seeing it again, where he and the woman that he's in cahoots with, they act like they're conducting a romance.
Right.
To control who's watching them. And it's really funny to see it in this, knowing full well that the character doesn't involve himself with women like that. But another really good point, and something I'll look forward to talking about as we go along.
I'm looking at the listings here again, and I know we were talking about at the top of the show about what to go with next. The problem with going with the A&E episodes is that they actually pull. They actually have Once Upon a Time mid-run in their collection. It's not Once Upon a Time followed by Fallout, which every other listing, no matter what, every other listing at least says Arrival is first, Once Upon a Time Fallout is last. What they did with A&E was they put Once Upon a Time following his first episode, Chimes of Big Ben.
Okay, well,
so they're back to back.
Well, however you want to do it, Jeff.
Well, because what I was going to suggest is, just for the sake of simplicity in that regard, is let's go with the original. Since I don't have an American rundown, let's go with the British one, and let's say for the next episode we do the Chimes of Big Ben.
I think that's wonderful. That's absolutely fine with me. I'm looking right now at Wikipedia, and they have Arrival, and then they have Chimes of Big Ben. They talk about the different orders, but the way they have it shown here is they call it the ITC ordering.
Right.
So it's Arrival, Chimes of Big Ben, A, B, and C, Free for All, and so on and so forth. And Once Upon a Time is before Fallout.
Right. Well, that isn't Once Upon a Time. Doesn't that lead into Fallout?
It is. It's the first of the 2 parts.
Which is why it's so weird when you look at what were they thinking in having it?
That's a really good question, because I don't really know. The production order.
Yeah, they've got The Girl Who Was Death before Fallout.
They claim Once Upon a Time is the 6th in production.
Yeah.
How weird.
Yeah.
And then number 17 is Fallout.
But how
weird. But how could they have made...
Wikipedia's not the only one. Wikipedia's not the only one making that claim. There's a couple of other websites I'm looking at that says the same thing, that Once Upon a Time was 6th in order. But you see, then that goes back to my whole thing of, this was supposed to have been less. 6 wasn't supposed... I have to even wonder if the very ending when, they lead number 2 and say, okay, all your answers will be like, I wonder if that was a tacked on scene at the end that they shot after, because they knew they were bringing McKern back for the final episode. So then it was like, well, we need that to lead into now. So let's tack it on here.
Yeah.
And again, don't know. I'm sure there are other people out there who could school us better on this and say you're all, and I'm not saying anything I'm saying here is, I'm just throwing out ideas as a fan who's watching this and going, oh, this is interesting. Maybe there are those who can say, no,
Well, let's just tell everybody right now, if you're still with us, if you haven't shut this off by now, if you're having a good time like we are, please know that we are going to be following the ITC ordering, the official ITC ordering. Right. So when you tune in next time, if you're brave enough to tune in next time, we will be talking about the Chimes of Big Ben.
Yes.
And we will be talking about the official Chimes of Big Ben, not necessarily the alternate Chimes of Big Ben.
Yes. Yeah.
I think maybe what we should do is we should probably watch both so that we can bring it up, but mainly talk about the official Chimes of Big Ben.
No, I agree. And by the way, folks, if you know, you still are with us, as Jim says, and there's anything there that you want to chime in on, whether it's because this is being posted on our Chronic Rift webpage at chronicrift.com. It's being posted on the Facebook page if you want to comment there. Or if you want, just write us at chronicrift@gmail.com. You know, we'll, talk about your comments on future episodes of the podcast.
Yeah, I'm going to issue the same challenge I issue to everybody every time I do a podcast with you is, we want to hear from you, please. Man does not podcast in a vacuum.
That's true. Well, I just podcast in my basement.
Okay.
This is
if we ever do a Monkeys podcast and we get up to the feature film Head, we can podcast in a vacuum, as they were sucked into a vacuum at one point.
Okay.
Wow, that one, talk about a tangent. Whew.
So I'm going to give you, because we're going to be doing this hopefully, and the plan is this is for the entire summer, because this is a nice, short, tight series that we can do here. But I wanted to, since this is the inaugural episode, just really quick before we go, Jim, if people want to get a hold of you and talk more, just, hey, Jim, run, don't listen to Drew anymore, those kind of emails.
Yeah.
How can they do that?
Hit me up on Facebook. There's a nice page called The Beard, the Jim Beard fan page. And you can drop me a private message there or post to me, whatever. You can find me on the Gotham City 14 Miles page on Facebook. And that's for my Batman book, Gotham City 14 Miles. And the new one called Zlonk Zok Zowie, the Subterranean Blue Grotto Guide to Batman 66 Season 1, which also features Mr. John Drew there.
Yes, sir.
And, you can hit me up on Twitter also. I'm at Writer Jim Beard, all one word, Writer Jim Beard. Please, and I'd love to hear from you people. Unless you're going to tell me how much I don't know about The Prisoner.
Oh, no, you can write us here. Write me at Chronic. And as I say, folks, I'm doing this as a fan, not as an expert. It's
here.
my take on this and Jim's take, but it doesn't mean it's gospel any more than anything else pretty much in the prison. If anything, out of all television shows, you got to accept all sorts of crazed theories about, because when it comes to The Prisoner, there seems to be a lot of them out there.
Yeah, well, it's just like the butler is number one.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is fun.
So, folks, make sure you tune in the next week when we take on the Chimes of Big Ben and Leo McKern as number 2. Until then, thank you so much for listening. Once again, Jim, everyone, be seeing you.
Be seeing you.